Right, so welcome. I'm just going to open us up with a karakia. Kia hora ti moreno, kia whakapapa punamu ti moana, hei huarahi ma tātou I te rangi nei, aroha atu, aroha mai, tātou ia tātou katoa. May peace be widespread, may the seed be like greenstone, a pathway for us all this day. Give love, receive love, let us show respect for each other. Kia ora koutou, it's so lovely to be here. Ko Zoe Lion-Gifford toku ingoa. I'm representing Waihanga Araro, and we're one of the providers of this webinar along with Hanga Araro. And that's all you need to know from me. I'm going to pass over to Angela and she's going to go from here. So relax, sit down and enjoy.
Kia ora everyone, thank you so much for making the time to come and spend this hour with us where we discuss how to be a great workmate. My name is Angela Meyer. I've been working on trade careers right from the very start. It's great to see so many people registered for this, and it is my very great pleasure to introduce my friend and fellow feminist, I'm just going to put it out there, Steph Dyhrberg. Welcome, Steph. Steph has got over 30 years experience in the law with a, a specialisation in employment law. And as part of the work that we've been doing at Trade Careers, Steph has been, Steph and her team, Patty as well, have created the resources, including some really great templates and policies that we have launched as part of the active bystander interventions guidelines. So if you haven't had a chance to have a look at them, I really encourage you to go to the website. These are amazing resources. When they came through, I was sitting here going, oh my God, what an absolute gift. So thank you very much, Steph. The format for today is Steph is going to take us through a presentation. There will be time for Q&A. If you do have a question, if you don't mind just popping it into the Q&A, and at the end, we'll make sure that we've got some time to answer those. So thank you once again for being here, and over to you, Steph.
Pēnā koutou katoa, ko Steph Dyhrberg aho. Now, I have shared my screen with a presentation. Are we able to bring that up? Is that showing?
See it.
It says I am screen sharing.
Yeah, I think I can see it.
Oh,
Yes,
excellent. Okay, we'll assume that's a yes then. So I did call it be a great workmate, mate, because I thought, well, that's a lot more positive than don't be a dick. And I hope that doesn't offend anyone. It's a joke in our family because my brother-in-law and my sister, their surname is actually Dick. And so we've been prohibited from using that expression. And of course, it's not very inclusive, but it is in common parlance in New Zealand. And you do hear people saying it sometimes. But I like this, be a great workmate, mate. And the other thing I like is the drink driving ads where it says, stop a mate, drink driving, be a bloody legend. And so that's also a bit of a useful one in this space, which is, speak up to protect a workmate, speak up to stop a mate, being inappropriate, what a bloody legend. So if that's all you take away from today, I think that's a very useful takeaway. So I'm going to be talking today, and sadly Patty is really ill, so she's not able to be with us today. I've told her she has to rest. So I'm going to be talking about the materials, the issue of particularly sexual harassment, but also sort of gendered bullying and misogyny, and explaining, what that means and, why that's such an issue, and some of the things that people and organisations can and should be doing to stop these things happening. So what we're going to talk about is negative behaviours at work. I don't like to dwell on talking about it. Partly it also can be quite triggering for people if you get kind of graphic about what is sexual harassment, because a vast majority of women have experienced sexual harassment and or sexual violence in their time. So I won't go into detail that hopefully will be upsetting for people. If anyone does find this session distressing or it brings stuff up for you, then please do access support. You can contact one of us, one of the team, and there are EAP resources available in most workplaces, but please do reach out to us if anything about this makes you feel uncomfortable or distressed after the session. So negative behaviours at work. I'll talk about the toolkit, which is, really a useful resource, bunch of resources, as Angela has said. We've tried really hard to make them as plain and accessible as possible so they're genuinely useful. Then how to keep out of trouble. And I do get, particularly guys often these days, saying, oh, I can't even look at a woman these days. I don't know what to do. What's okay, what's not okay. I spent a whole big walk the other day with my brother and he's going, oh, I said this, is this okay? And I go, yeah, that's okay. I said this and I went, yeah, that's okay, but don't get creepy. So sometimes people do want a bit of guidance about how to keep out of trouble. And then how to respond, being an active bystander. And so what does that actually mean? And what are the sorts of things that you might be able to do? So we'll talk through those and obviously answer questions, and we'll, you can ask anything you want and we will try to answer. So negative behaviours at work, what is it that we're talking about? And you hear these phrases, you hear these words in popular society and media and social media all the time, and you get a lot of pushback about talking about this stuff sometimes. And sometimes you get a sort of stuff about, oh, this is just cancel culture, you can't say anything or do anything anymore. And I don't think that's right. I think that is a normal, understandable defensive reaction, because nobody likes to think that they or somebody else that they know is treating somebody inappropriately, and it's a hard thing to talk about. But we're talking about common or garden sexism, because sexism and misogyny, which I'll talk about in a minute, sexism and treating women and girls differently and worse, and like they're kind of a bit second rate, is the bedrock of sexual harm and sexual harassment. So if people have a general kind of societal attitude towards women and girls that says that if you're female, you kind of like come second, then that's what sexism really is. And it is the bedrock of then, well, if that's the case, if they're not really as good as men and boys, then it's okay if you treat them a certain way, if you treat them worse. And sexualizing them or objectifying them is really common in our society. I mean, it's everywhere in media, think about advertising, everywhere you look, the female form, the female body is kind of objectified and sexualized. And this happens from a very early age for girls. And so it's sort of so common that then when you question it, people, have a go at you for questioning that, because it's just so common. It's been so normalized that talking about it is even unusual or taboo. So sexism is anything, an attitude or behaviour that says that women and girls are inherently somehow defective or secondary to men. And that's what the patriarchy is all about. So if you talk about patriarchy, that is simply the system that we mostly have. There are a few places around the world that operate differently or have operated differently through time. I know in Vietnam, they've got matriarchies in a few tribes, which seemed interesting to me. But misogyny is something different from sexism. Misogyny is actually like a deep-rooted kind of hatred for women, or malevolence towards women, thinking that they should be harmed, or that they're trying to hurt men, or that you should subjugate them, you should push them down and oppress them. So misogyny is like hardcore sexism to a point that's really harmful. So you see they're sort of layered. You've got sexism, the patriarchy, and then you've got misogyny, which is really the nasty end of it. And on top of that, then it becomes okay, because you're kind of semi-dehumanized people in your mind. Then that's why you think, well, I'm entitled to do things to them, say things to them, show them things that are sexual, because I can do that to them. It's a sense of entitlement. And so that's where that behaviour is so normalised, and why we're trying to deconstruct it. Bullying, pretty obvious what bullying is, often described as, behaviour that is trying to manipulate people or undermine them, control them, treat them badly, unwarranted, unpleasant behaviour that makes people feel bad. The work safe health and safety paradigm of bullying also talks about, and that can cause people harm. That is psychosocial harm, which means in your head, it's emotional, it's the way you feel, it can have physical symptoms, but rather than physical harm, like someone punching you, bullying undermines you mentally and psychologically and makes you miserable. So a lot of people will describe lots of things as bullying. They may or may not be technically bullying, but the person will definitely feel bullied. Racism, again, should be self-explanatory, but we do get a lot of stuff written off as banter. I saw there was an employer in the media yesterday, I think, saying, that an employee who's Indian said that from the time he'd started working for this guy, he and other Indian employees were being treated differently and poorly, and that they were being called names, that the way that they speak was being exaggerated and mimicked like that. And, and called names and jokes about, oh, well, if an Indian dies in a workplace accident, that's no biggie because there's lots from where they came from. Now, I would hope that lots of people would find that appalling, but other people, including this employer, said, oh, it's just banter. And it's like, well, is it banter or is it actually racism? And I think it's racism. Just because you're saying it in what you think is a humorous way, it doesn't make it okay. And it's not funny to the person on the receiving end. And even if they're laughing, if they're uncomfortable laughing, you can tell when somebody's just laughing along because they're too uncomfortable to say that they don't like it. So that's the sort of stuff we're talking about. And it could be things that used to be kind of okay when I was young. I'm Gen X. So, when I was growing up in the sort of 70s and stuff, it was, not unusual to talk about island time if somebody was late. That kind of stuff, that low-level stuff, but to the people on the receiving end, it is definitely not well received, even if they're kind of laughing along with it. So we've put together this kit of useful tools, and you've got your tools on the job, they're great. You've got rules about, safety and what you do and how you, construct things and how the trades work on construction projects. And this is a kit of the tools you need and the rules that you need to treat the people involved in your industry in a lawful and fair and reasonable way, and to kind of keep organisations and employers out of trouble and to keep people safe. And keeping people safe on the job is a really big focus in most sectors, but particularly I think in construction, there's always been this focus on don't hit your hand with the hammer, don't fall off a ladder, don't electrocute yourself, don't put a nail gun through your shoe. Yes, all of those things are very good. They're good rules, and it's good to have systems to prevent physical harms. But 80% of harm in New Zealand workplaces that affects people and puts them off work is what I call that psychosocial. It's the product of bullying and harassment and stress and misery. And so those harms we have traditionally put a lot less focus on because they're less obvious than someone cutting their hand off. So that's the sort of things that we are talking about. So then the tools that we've created is a suite of policies and procedures. And a lot of people go, policies and procedures, hell dull. We've tried to make them as accessible and conversational and down to earth as possible, and the hope that people can adapt them for their workplaces and say, well, look, these are really positive, simple, clear things, and everyone who reads them should be on the same page, understanding what their obligations are. So a lot of them are about HR needs. So for small employers particularly, you can't afford to go off and pay a whole lot of money or have an HR person necessarily to put these things in place to make sure that you're complying with all your legal employer obligations. So we've covered these things off. Contracts and agreements, how to use them, what they're for, health and safety obligations, drug and alcohol stuff, bullying and sexual harm prevention, and then some policies and guidelines around diversity and preventing racism and discrimination, and then a privacy policy as well. So, I think they're really useful, and I encourage you to go and have a look at them. And don't wait until you're in a disaster situation before you go and look at them. It's the same as any kind of emergency preparedness, that you don't read it while, the building's burning down. You don't start pulling out the evacuation policy and go, God, what are we meant to do again? So it's the same with these things. Have a look at them before you need them. We've tried to put in place also these simple, clear, easy to follow guidelines for what sexual harm, bullying and discrimination are, and also the bystander materials that I'll come to shortly. So a lot of what to do, what not to do, simple, clear examples, you know, the sorts of things we're talking about. And quite often we talk around things. We'll talk about inappropriate behaviour, unprofessional, disrespectful behaviour. Yes, that is what we're talking about, but sometimes particularly younger people will say, oh, but smacking someone on the ass is okay, right? Not really. It's a little bit like an indecent assault, really. It's if that's something that you're fine with and you think is fun, it's still, is it okay in the workplace, and is it setting a good example? Is it dangerous because you're trying to, you know, hammer something and someone's touching your bottom? So they're really simple, clear examples of the sorts of things that aren't okay. And they include things like, you know, sending people pictures of bits of yourself that should be private, and those sorts of things, just so that people are clear what we're talking about. And I had a big sort of furore on the internet the other day because, you know, I love to use my powerful pocket computer to argue with strangers on the internet, useful, and look at cats. But, you know, I commented that I'd had a person who I regarded as a friend who, when I'd walked into a bar one night to meet my friends, commented on my bottom, and in a positive way, but I didn't say anything about whether it was positive or negative when I first said, you know, creepy old dude does this to me. And a lot of people tried to tell me that if his comment was complimentary, then it wasn't harassment and I shouldn't have been offended. I said, well, I was offended. It actually is harassment, commenting on my body in that way. The fact whether it was positive or negative is utterly irrelevant. And, you know, if the comments are unwelcome, even if they are supposedly positive comments, then they're still offensive to me. I don't want you commenting on my body. That's unwelcome to me. And so just getting that understanding, a lot of people came to tell me that I shouldn't be offended by a compliment. But if it's commenting in a sexual way on a body part, that is harassment. It's if it's unwelcome. So that just getting those things really clear for people. There's also stuff in there about how to deal with complaints, how to make complaints, how to run a decent process, and also how to protect the people, everyone involved in those processes, which is really important and often, unfortunately, not done very well. And people find these processes that we all run to try and deal with complaints and issues quite damaging to them sometimes because they're not careful and they're not supportive enough. We always have to put health and safety first. So how to keep out of trouble at work. And I sat there when I was putting this together and I thought, let's just keep it really real. So one of the questions I sometimes ask when men, particularly men, but anyone of any gender can harass anyone of any gender. But quite often it is men who ask me this sort of question is, oh, look, I'm just being nice to them. It's a compliment, or it's just a bit of banter, or I'm just being chivalrous. And I said, well, are you treating this workmate differently than other workmates who maybe are of a different gender? And they said, well, yes. So, well, why? I go, well, because I do, because it's the, you know, and if they can't answer that question, if you can't answer that question about why am I treating this person differently, then probably there's a reason in there that is something about, you know, it's something about sexism, or it's something about racism, or it's disrespectful. So why is it that you're treating that person differently? And is there a legitimate reason for treating them differently? Someone tells me I'm being a dick, or someone says, hey, dude, I don't like that, or hey, I find that offensive, or you really upset me when you said that. And are you the person who argues about that and tells them that they shouldn't be offended, or just ignores that and does it again? Or do you say, hey, I don't want to be that person. I don't want to be, even if it wasn't my intention. Oh, I never meant to upset you. I never realized. Well, I'm telling you, you did. So what are you going to do now? Are you going to continue to tell me that I shouldn't have been offended? Are you going to give me the non-apology of, I'm sorry you got upset about that, but I didn't mean to offend you and I don't think it was offensive and you can't take a joke? Or are you going to go, hey, wow, I absolutely didn't mean to offend you. I'm so sorry to hear that I offended you, and I'm really sorry. And I will not do that again. So you own the behavior, whether you actually agree or not. Here's this person who is telling you that you've really upset them or offended them or hurt them. And so in my book, you do something about that. But the first thing is that you acknowledge it, you stop, you acknowledge it, you check, you know, if you look even like you're making someone uncomfortable. And I watch carefully for when people change color. And so if somebody flushes, they start flushing when you're talking to them, that generally means that you're making them feel uncomfortable in some way. They're embarrassed or they're ashamed or they're scared. And so if it looks like you might be making someone uncomfortable, don't just keep going. Stop, check, are you okay? Have I said something to upset you? Are you okay? And, you know, and then if you have offended them, then apologize. And remember, most of the time they will not tell you. And people don't have to tell you that you are making them feel uncomfortable for it to potentially be harassment. And then don't do it again. You know, if somebody tells you they don't like it or you can see that it went down badly, please don't keep doing it. It's not sort of, you know, rinse and repeat until funny. If it wasn't funny the first time, it's certainly not funny the third time. And the other good rule of thumb is imagine your mum was watching. And, you know, some people don't have this sort of relationship with their mum where that makes sense to them. But, you know, imagine someone you respect. Imagine the boss was watching. Imagine your partner was watching a video of your behaviour that night when you get home. Imagine your kids are watching. You know, would you still behave that way and would you be proud of that behaviour? And if the answer is no, I wouldn't do that in front of them, then ask yourself whether you're doing it because you think you're going to get away with it and maybe there's a power imbalance, or you've got the group of mates egging you on, so you're all making each other feel like it's okay, but deep down you know it's not okay. Is it just a joke they can't take? And this is the one that really bugs me a lot of the time. You can't take a joke. Au contraire, I have an excellent sense of humour. I am funny, I am earthy, I am down to earth, I am sometimes irreverent. I can take a joke. What I can't take is being, you know, attacked or ridiculed for something about myself that I can't help. You know, so there's jokes and then there's not funny. There's things that are offensive. There are things that are creepy. And so saying, oh, you just can't take a joke. I mean, my first response was, oh, was that a joke? Because I didn't find it funny. And that tends to have quite a nice withering kind of effect. You know, you have to be a bit older and have grey hair for it to really work. But I find that's quite good. But it just might be a bit creepy. And young women often talk to me about behaviour that it's not really, really bad, but it's kind of creepy. And largely they say that men much older than them are not people that they want to hear sexual stuff from at all, not remotely. They think you know, of their dad's age or their granddad's age, they do not want to hear sexual stuff coming out of your mouth. They find it really creepy. And then who's laughing and how are they laughing? And if people are also going, you know, they're not comfortable. It's, you know, you're not entertaining them. And then this, would I be proud of watching a video of my behaviour sitting in a meeting with the boss in HR? You know, and so because you may end up there if you keep behaving badly. And then the other question is, how would I want the people I love to be treated at work? So there will be somebody in your life you care about, whether it's a partner or a child or your parents or a mate. You know, how do you want them to be treated at work? And then are you treating people in your workplace that way? Because it's sort of quid pro quo. Like if we all treat everyone's kids and mums and brothers and sisters and friends at work the way we would like ours to be treated, well, then it sort of does go around. And then you can legitimately say, well, you know, yes, I treat people the way I do someone I love or someone I respect. So what care would you take if it was someone that you genuinely respected? And you might not like them. You don't have to like or love the people you work with. You don't have to genuinely have enormous respect for everyone at work, because you might not. They might not deserve it or they might not have earned it. But everyone does have a fundamental right, and that is to go to work and not be molested or badgered or subjected to racism or bullied. Everyone has that fundamental legal and sort of human right to go to work and be kind of unmolested at work and get on with their job. And so you don't have the right to do that to them. That's really what it fundamentally boils down to. So the why intervene, and this is kind of leaning into the bystander stuff. If you see stuff that you think is inappropriate or it's sexual harassment or it's bullying or it's creepy or it's racism, and you don't do anything, then it probably won't stop. And so the real thing is harm prevention. And I think taking a health and safety lens to it, if you saw someone about to, if you see a toddler about to stick a fork into an electric socket, I suggest that you'd probably, unless you're a psychopath, you're going to rush over and stop them doing that, and have a talk to them about why we don't do that. If you see someone at work who's about to do something really dangerous, our hope is that you would stop them doing that, because they might get hurt or someone else might get hurt. And similarly, preventing harm to people from the kind of behaviour I'm talking about is a health and safety issue, and it should be on the health and safety kind of chat list. It's also making everyone feel they belong and can do the job. And I do hear a lot of people say that it's tiresome. They go to work to do their job. It should be their kind of safe, if not happy place, then at least comfortable place. You don't know what's going on in the rest of their life or the rest of their world on the street or in clubs or at home. But this should be a place where they feel that they fit in, they belong, they're welcome, and they're there to do their job, and that everyone's part of a team. The construction industry absolutely needs it. We all know that there are shortages of people. We know Australia is, poaching a lot of people from us, which apparently they're allowed to do. And we really need it, because we need to encourage more people into the industry and encourage more women into the industry, because they're underutilised and underrepresented. But also, just to keep the industry going, it has to be a healthy place to be. And we've got too many people, and particularly men, in the construction industry who are self-harming. The suicide rate is really high. There's a lot of people suffering and not very happy. And so if we see something going on, or we see someone is having a bad time and we do nothing, then are we really doing our part to make it a place that feels safe and welcoming to everyone? The thing is, diversity is proven in every study there's ever been. Diversity has been proven to make things more successful in work and business and teams. So different skills, different perspectives help us understand other people's needs and perspectives, but they bring different thoughts to the table. And so, the other night we're sitting there, my brother's going to get a hammering today. We were over in Melbourne to watch some rugby. It was great. We were watching the commentary team on, whatever TV channel it was. And there were like 4 women, I think, all, experts. They were broadcasters, or they're former sports players and so forth, former footballers. And they were all talking about the game. And I commented to my sister-in-law, oh, look, they're all wearing pants and they've all got pockets. And she and I are like, yeah, girl power. And my brother goes, what are you talking about? And it had never crossed his mind or entered his reality that pockets in clothing is a feminist issue. He was completely oblivious to this. I've now thankfully, helpfully, I've sent him an article about it. But, he didn't know that because he was born with pockets. Even boys' pajamas have pockets. So he didn't know that for women, this can be a real issue, that our clothing is often designed in such a way that we don't have pockets and we want them now. So, his perspective was completely different. And I said to him, go and talk to some of the women you work with, like they'll have this perspective. So it's just, if you haven't walked a certain path, you don't know what that's like. And so you can't bring that perspective to it. And so having diversity definitely helps teams in the industry be more successful. And it adds to the bottom line. Diversity in governance and management is proven to make businesses more profitable. It's a fact. Look it up. So, active bystanders. I am a particularly active bystander. I wasn't always able to be an active bystander, and I can't always do it. I don't always feel 100% comfortable, and sometimes it's not safe to be a really active bystander. But when I'm in a situation where somebody is racist or sexist or ableist or nasty about trans women or something like that, and I feel that I will always say something. I will always do something. And sometimes I'm the only person who will do or say something, and I find that kind of disappointing. I've been on a railway carriage where one of the guards was being really horrible to a young Asian woman. I was the only person in the carriage who spoke up, and I did then make a complaint about it because it was pretty awful. And you know, after I spoke up and after this guy sort of, you know, mumbled his way off into another carriage to harass another young Asian woman, no doubt, people around me sort of like, oh, good on you. And I went, well, you know, thanks for backing me up, you know, not. So look, not everyone can, not everyone has the privilege to do it. It's not always safe. But what is it? What is this thing about being an active bystander? It is witnessing harmful behaviour. In this case, we're talking about in the workplace, and doing something. And I always say, look, if you can, just do a thing. It might be a tiny thing. But if you stay completely silent, later you'll kick yourself and you'll wish that you'd said something or done something. So next time, do a thing. It might be reporting it later, but it might be in the moment. You help someone out, and or you call it out. And so everyone has a part to play. And if everyone in the workplace said, hey, that's not cool, that's not what we do around here, hey, look, I don't think that's appropriate, or can you please stop? Like, that's not okay, that's not how we roll. Then people would stop doing it, right? And people would reflect on their own behavior as well. It's much easier to call someone out than to look at yourself and acknowledge that you're doing something inappropriate. And I think it's my superpower, feeling embarrassed about things I've done wrong and trying to make amends. But if everyone did it, then we wouldn't have an issue. And human nature, we're always going to have an issue. So it applies on site, it applies off site. You know, you're going down to get supplies down at the hardware, or you are, you know, somewhere else representing the company, you're at a conference, you're at a function, wherever it is, you know, be alert to situations where maybe you need to put on your superhero cape and just say, hey, mate, that isn't cool. And it might be stuff that you do before things. It might be that you've noticed that somebody sometimes makes comments that you think are not okay, or maybe they're being a bit creepily physical, and you think, right, if I see them actually doing something, I'm going to say something. You think about, what would it take for me to do that? What would be a safe thing to do? You might talk to someone who you've noticed looks a bit uncomfortable in a situation, wasn't really over the line in a big way, but you might go and talk to that person later and say, hey, you looked really uncomfortable. What would you like me to do to support you if that happens again? And have that conversation. And then during the incident, if there is behaviour, you know, to sort of take a deep breath and then to say, get alongside the person, or say something, or call it out, or actually go, you know, intervene, like actually step in and go, hey, whoa, stop, this isn't okay. And then after the incident, it might be going and comforting the person, checking that they're okay, seeing if they want to do something about it, might be talking to a manager, might be going to HR if you have HR. Research suggests that when someone steps in, harmful behaviour is likely to stop right away. The other thing, however, is a lot of people, like my train carriage example, will assume that somebody else is going to say something. And sometimes they just don't. The bystander effect is quite powerful, that people sort of think, oh, no one else is doing anything. Will I do anything? I don't want to stand out. Oh, I don't want to make trouble. And then it's too late. The moment's gone. And it takes practice. I've gotten a lot better at it over the years. So how to be an active bystander? So you might delay, you might just say, can we just take a break here? I just want to have a chat to Sally. And say, or look, I think it's time for a coffee. Or you might just make your disapproval really apparent. You might use body language, and you might just look at them like, you are being such a douche. I cannot believe you're saying this. Or they might ask you something and you just look at them and you're just like, oh, now you're talking to me, and now you want me to participate here or something. It might be that you just signal something. You might not specifically say, I think the way you just spoke to Roger was really inappropriate. I think you're bullying. So it might be that you just do something tiny, a little micro pause, a little micro action. You might distract. And particularly I've read about if somebody is being racially harassed, for example, you know, in a workplace or in public transport, and it's actually not a very safe situation, particularly if you don't know the person. that's doing the bad behavior. It might be that you just kind of, distract or divert and get attention away from them. Women do this for each other quite often out in pubs and clubs. They might come and go, "Oh, Michelle, I haven't seen you for ages. How are you?" Or whatever it might be. You might interrupt then and get them away from the person who is hassling them. You might go, "Oh, I need to go to the bathroom." This is why women often go in twos. "I need to go to the loo, come with me." And it might be you get them away from a situation. So you might be able to distract. Then direct, you might, and this is more my style, but that's because I'm very assertive and old and I just don't care anymore. You might say, "This is a good one. Can you repeat that? What did you just say? Can I just check that I heard you right? Did you just say, oh, you must have been working out because, you're a lot skinnier and, I can see whatever, or whatever it is, can you just say that?" And then you can say, "I don't think that's funny." And bless Patty, she included "don't be a dick." But I mean, you really can in the moment, or you might use humor. And humor is another good one. You've got to be careful. You've got to keep on the right side of humor, but it might be that you actually do, in the moment, just go, the 1950s called like their sexism back, and it might be that you diffuse a situation, but you make your point, but you just gauge what in the moment do you feel comfortable doing that might be helpful. And you do have to think about this. Again, it's like reading the evacuation manual when the house is on fire. If you don't think about it beforehand and sort of think through, how would I deal with a situation like that? What would I do in that moment? What could I do in that moment? Then in the moment, not everyone's a really quick thinker and a quick processor, and you might have to think about it. And sometimes people will say to me, "God, this thing happened, and I thought about what Steph said, and I thought Steph would do a thing," and then the moment's passed. And I said, "Okay, well, what would you do next time?" And so we talk about what they might do if that happened again. Or they could go back. I said, "Go back to them now. Go back to that person now, if it's someone you work with or whether you see in a social context or a work context. Go back to them and say, it's been really bothering me that I didn't say anything the other day when you said this thing, but I've decided I'm really not comfortable with it and I want to talk to you about it." Or you might go to somebody else who can help have that conversation. If it's a serious situation that you think has to be escalated, then you should document it as soon as possible after the event. Write a little file note. Just write down or text the details of what happened to the appropriate person, whether it's HR or a manager or whoever it might be, and just go, "I just saw this thing. I just heard this thing. This behaviour was really inappropriate. It went on for a while. Here's some of the language that was used. Here's what I saw, and here's the reaction that I saw. Details: who was there, when it happened, where it was." And so that will help fix it in your memory. And it also is taken very seriously, contemporaneous at the time or close after the time. Evidence is taken really seriously, particularly if it gets to an investigation. And then delegate, get support from somebody else, get support from a manager or a leader, or if you have HR, go to HR. And look, not everyone knows what to do about that stuff. That's why training and education and materials are really important. We're not all born knowing how to do all this stuff really well. So remember, with bystander stuff, by taking no action, you're basically saying it's acceptable because it's accepted in the moment. Now, that sounds like a harsh thing to say, I suppose, but when you think about it, if you're the person who's been sexually harassed or bullied or someone's been racist to you, and everyone around you is saying nothing and just kind of pretending it hasn't happened, or worse, laughing along with it or joining in, how does it feel to be that person? It's like, great, that's apparently okay around here, and I can't say anything because now I'll look like I can't take a joke or I'm oversensitive. I've got no allies here. Nobody knows how that feels. It's not safe here. It's not safe to say anything. This is kind of acceptable here. That's kind of what the person who's on the receiving end might be thinking about this. And they'll feel really disappointed and let down. And I've been in situations like that where I was in a working group, and somebody in that working group basically ended up shouting at me in front of a room of 20 people. And he'd had enough of me. He didn't want me to keep expressing my opinion, and he didn't agree with me, and he just ended up shouting at me and to shut me up. And I was the only person he treated like that. We'd been working together for a wee while. And in that moment, I was actually bitterly disappointed that nobody in the room said, hey, steady on, that's not okay. Or do you want to lower your voice? Or we don't shout at people in meetings. No one said anything. And people said something afterwards. Someone followed me into the ladies' room and said, oh God, you know. But I was really disappointed that no one in that moment, especially I was looking around at the men in that group and just thinking, really, you know, come and get your guy because he's out of control. And I was really gutted. I could stand up for myself, and I did. I managed it. But I was just disappointed that no one said anything. And that meant that no one said anything to him about it either. So not only did no one stand up for me and protect me, which would have been nice, but also no one said to him, hey, that behaviour wasn't okay. And he had no insight about it, and you know, was just a bit of a bully. But yeah, it's, you know, being in that situation is not nice. So, you know, standing up for other people, put your cape on. It's a little bit easier to stand up for someone else and to stand up for yourself. And that's the other thing about being a really good bystander, being an ally to people, is quite often they are powerless to say anything because they don't have the privilege. They're in a minority voice anyway. They already feel other. They already feel like they don't necessarily belong. And then if they speak up, that just makes it worse. So other people rallying around and going, hey, that's not okay, is incredibly powerful. So that's what I have to say. So I'll stop sharing. And then happy to take any questions. And I can see there might be a few in the Q&A in the chat.
Thank you so much, Steph, for first of all, for your honesty and sharing some of those examples that have happened to you. And I think it is always really useful when we have examples. And to your point, you know, sometimes these things can be tricky, but I do think that the guidelines that we've produced and the webinars that we've been hosting actually is really hopefully breaking this down for people. And I was really interested. I didn't know that 80% of the harm is the social harm. So that was both heartbreaking and actually really interesting.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I actually learned that the first time I heard that was from Nicole Rosie, who used to be the chief executive of WorkSafe. And when the Russell McVeigh sexual harm scandal kind of broke, and I tried to refer that to WorkSafe, and they just went, no, we don't do that. And they now have a team that deals with psychosocial harm, with bullying and harassment, which, you know, is great. They have the resources. But I remember her saying that that was a study that had been done in the UK, and that the UK is 20 years ahead of us in their health and safety response to bullying and harassment and stress and the things in the workplace that are not physical harm. But we tend to put 80% of our resources into the 20% of the physical harms. Yeah.
So we have got a really interesting question here, and I think it's probably one that a lot of people experience, and it's from Colleen, and it says, so after stepping up and saying something and then following up and lodging a formal complaint, this can have a really big effect on the work you get from a main contractor. So how do you suggest this is navigated? And she's given an example where they had a real experience of this when one of our tradeswomen was subjected to some pretty bad, seriously bad behaviour. And when she went directly to the supervisor, he made further jokes about what she could have said. And their staff member was really upset, and they ended up calling the team ended up calling the police and putting in a formal complaint, and the work stopped, and we were told we were too difficult. So this is a really big thing, you know, like we want to make sure that we have really good, robust processes, but also we need to keep our businesses going. So really interested in what.
That is a fantastic. Yeah, it's a fantastic question. So look, it depends on the context, but I always think that there are people I want to do business with, and there are people I don't want to do business with. And I've always made it really, really plain in my own businesses that I've run that anyone who treats me or my staff disrespectfully will have one opportunity to have a conversation about it, but I will fire a client for being disrespectful to me or my staff. So that's just my personal stance on it. Now that's easy for me because there's plenty more fish in the sea. But if if you're really dependent on a source of work, then that can be much more challenging. But I think the way that you go about raising it with them, and actually you need to sort of, no pun intended, back the truck up first. And in the commercial contract that you have between parties working together or giving each other work, put an emphasis on the contractual obligations around health and safety and respectful conduct, and talking about a common set of policies about this is the policies we have for the way our staff are treated when we're working with our clients, and we would like to have a common understanding with you that this is how we expect our people to be treated, and that if there were to be any behaviour that breached these obligations, we would regard that as serious. We would want to have a sit down and a process to address that behaviour in a professional way. So that ideally precedes any conduct, that you actually include that. And I've helped organisations incorporate that into their commercial terms to actually say, this is how we expect your people to behave when they're working with our people. So that's one thing. The second is the way that you go about raising it with the other entity. I mean, you obviously try to be as respectful and professional and constructive about the situation, and like, we have a problem and can we address this together because this isn't safe and it's not appropriate, it's going to impact on the delivery of the work, and blah blah blah. If a client just goes, nah, you're just trouble, you shouldn't have made a fuss, then you may or may not be able to change their mind. You might ask for a top level meeting, and ideally between your chief executives is ideal, to actually sit down and say, we want to have a talk about this because we want to do business with you, we value your business, but obviously we have these enormous health and safety obligations towards our staff, as do you, when our staff are working on your premises or on your project or with your people. So we all have these common obligations, and all of us can come to legal grief and can have cases against us. And we now have triangular employment relationships now recognised in our law. So you can say, oh, well, they're not my employee, so I'm not responsible for them. In a health and safety sense, you indeed maybe, because there are shared obligations in health and safety, but also you might find yourself on the receiving end of them saying that you're one of their employers as well. So, hey, we've all got these obligations here and we've all got risk. How can we address this so that this is a safe workplace and we can still have a commercial relationship? If they're not interested in that conversation, then frankly, they're people that you just can't do business with. And they may take that out of your hands by not giving work anymore, but you try and do that by relationship management, risk management, and education, and say, hey, look, the world is changing and we just can't, this sort of stuff, it really isn't okay anymore. And let's see if we can work through this together. But some people just don't want to know, and you can't force people, you can't bludgeon it into them if they really don't want to deal with it. But I just think your obligations to your staff are far more important. And you make it part of your brand, like, we have a safe, inclusive workplace. We protect our people from harm. We work together with the people that we do business with to make sure that everyone who's in our workplace or on our sites is safe, and it's a healthy environment for everyone. We take concerns seriously. Go find clients who understand, what you're about, your ethos, and share your values.
Yeah, I mean, I think, thank you, Steph, that was a really great and full answer. And I think, one of the things in kind of creating the guidelines, and I think this speaks to your point as well, Colleen, is that, we can have the policies and walking the talk, but actually it's a lot different to talking the talk. And I think, there is a sort of an aspect of having to be a bit of a trailblazer in this space. But I do think there's a lot also around making sure that it is kind of framed within the health and safety piece, because, there has been a lot of work done in terms of, physical health and safety. And that's something that people are like, wow, I'm liable if something happens on my site. Do you have any kind of well, do you know anything about that kind of liability for, the psychosocial harm that happens on site, Steph?
I know a lot about it. That's a whole nother workshop. Yes, in a nutshell. And look, somebody was just telling me this morning that WorkSafe has come into their workplace and has raised a concern about bullying in that workplace. And so there's going to be an investigation. So, WorkSafe can turn up on your doorstep and do an investigation, can issue infringement notices or compliance notices. At worst, if there is a really serious sexual harm or bullying incident in the workplace, causes real harm, which can be psychological harm, then WorkSafe can actually prosecute. And look, it's only a matter of time. Australia's had their first one recently of a prosecution for sexual harassment, multiple sexual harassment instances in a workplace where basically a serial creep. They've prosecuted that company and its officers for not having acted to prevent that harm. So it's only a matter of time before we have one as well. So it's definitely a health and safety obligation. I mean, there's no two ways about it. It is definitely the case. The other thing is under the Human Rights Act, people can make sexual harassment complaints about someone who is not their employer. If they're in a working environment and they're being treated that way, there's several obligations, legal obligations, and there are implications for them. So, and of course, going to the police. The police aren't going to care whether it's your employer or not. They're just going to go, did this person, break the law? Did this person engage in a criminal act? And so, that is a very real risk. So working on this, we have Houston, we have a problem, is always better than you have a problem. It's just like, we have a very upset staff member, we don't think that this is appropriate. If this is on our staff, we take it seriously and we'd like to work through this with you to try to de-escalate and address the situation so that everyone can work together more respectfully in future. And if they go, no, we're not interested, you're too much trouble, well, it's going to be taken out of your hands. They're not going to want to work with you, and your staff and their well-being are your business. And yes, you need customers, and yes, you need paying work. But if you don't have staff who feel safe and comfortable at work, or people leave because it isn't safe and comfortable, you don't have a business.
Yeah, totally. I mean, that's the bottom line, really, Steph. Just a quick shout out, if there are any more questions, now is your time to pop them into the chat. And I'll just see, just one moment, please, caller. No, I think that might be it for the questions. Just also wanted to, it's like, oh my God, amazing. Also just wanted to kind of mention that both Waihanga Araro and Hanga Araro have been responsible for, working on the development of these guidelines, and, the Keep It Decent guidelines, which we launched last year, really we're looking at how do we make sure that we, keep sexual harassment out of our workplaces. And the bystander guidelines that we've developed this year are, these are things that we want to keep building on. So please let us know if there's anything that, you in the industry are worried about or have concerns about or need some more support. We're absolutely here to make sure that we make the trades as safe as and inclusive a workplace as we possibly can. Steph, I just want to say thank you so much for your time and your expertise, and also for the incredible resources. They are available on the Trade Careers website, and if you go to the Trade Careers website and go to, you can look up guidelines. We do have the Keep It Decent ones and the new ones, the Bystander guidelines as well. Inside the guidelines, we have broken down, there's some case studies, there's examples, there's a list of other places that you can go for support if you do find yourself in a situation where you're going to need some extra support. And as always, you can contact any one of the team here to help you as well. Oh, hang on, we might have a couple of questions. Just checking. Oh no, that's a nice, no, they're just like telling us thank you very much. So that's awesome.
Oh, good. Can I make one last observation? Because I sometimes do get a bit of this sort of pushback about we don't know how to behave, all that sort of stuff. even if you really don't get it and don't get why it's not okay to comment on a woman's body or something like that. I remember that it wasn't that long ago that we as a society tolerated catcalling from building sites. So it was not uncommon as a woman with a pulse to walk past a construction site and have wolf whistles and loud comments and, you know, to feel really a bit vulnerable. And it wasn't nice, and most people didn't like it. And then one day it stopped. And why did it stop? It stopped because people started telling the people building on their sites for them, customers started saying, that is not acceptable to us. You are to direct your people that they are not to behave that way because it reflects badly on us and we don't want it. And all of a sudden, almost overnight, it stopped happening. And so whether people agreed with it or not, whether the guys that were doing that before got it or not, they knew that they were at risk of losing their jobs if they kept doing it. So they stopped doing it. And so we had a change in behaviour because of consequences, and it just became a thing that it wasn't okay to do anymore. So I just would put that out there to think a little reflection point.
Well, it's always the old carrot and the stick, and ideally people respond to the carrot, but sometimes the stick in terms of legislation and in terms of
just knowing it's there.
Just popping it there. I like it. Also, I just really love the comment from Colleen here, world domination, one woman at a time. And as Erica said, we really encourage you to share these guidelines with your networks. We really want, the idea is that these guidelines become something that people can really feel proud of following and pledging their support to, and promising that they're going to actually create safe and respectful workplaces. So again, thank you so much, Steph, for your time. Thank you everybody for being here. I continue to learn from everyone here, so it's a real privilege and a pleasure. And I'm just going to pass back to Zoe now to share the last bit.
Kia ora Ange, kia ora Steph. On behalf of Waihanga Aroro and Hanga Aroro, I want to just send out so much gratitude to both of you for your hard work on this and for sharing your insights and knowledge. It's been so helpful, and I think all of us individually and in our mahi can take this on for ourselves in situations that we're in, and also spreading it to others who we know need it as well. So I just want to say thank you again and close us off with a karakia. Kia hora te marino, kia whakapapa punamu te moana, hei huarahi mā tātou I te rangi nei, aroha atu, aroha mai, tātou ia tātou katoa. Ka kite.
Ka kite, thank you.